My boyfriend wanted me to terminate because of my pregnancy weight. My boyfriend, Josh, told his friends he didn't want me to have his baby because I was getting too fat during my pregnancy. That one sentence, relayed to me over the phone by a coworker I barely knew, was the single match that burned my entire world to the ground. So I walked away. I left him, gave birth to our daughter completely alone, and in the ashes of the life I thought I wanted, I had a glow up. I found a strength I never knew I possessed. And eventually, I found someone who actually loved me, all of me, unconditionally. That's what drove my ex insane. He couldn't stand to see me happy with someone else, and it made him go absolutely psycho. He stalked me, he terrorized me, he crashed my wedding. He forced me into a corner where my only option was to take everything from him. Looking back, it's hard to pinpoint the exact moment things started to crack. Josh and I had been together for 4 years. We were a classic dating app success story, hitting it off immediately over a shared, dorky love for obscure comics and cheesy 80s action movies. Our relationship had an easy, comfortable pace. On our third date, we spent 6 hours in a booth at a greasy diner, arguing about whether Han Solo or Indiana Jones was Harrison Ford's better role, and I knew then that I was falling for him. He had this laugh that was just so genuine, it made his whole face light up. We moved in together after 2 years, seamlessly blending our collections of graphic novels and vinyl records. A year after that, we adopted a ridiculously fluffy cat we named Chewy, and he became our entire world. Life was good. It was simple and it was ours. Then last January, we learned I was pregnant. That day was supposed to be the best day of my life. For months, Josh had been the one pushing for a baby. He'd talk about it constantly, about all the father-son things he wanted to do, how he couldn't wait to teach our kid how to play Dungeons and Dragons. He'd point out families at the park and get the soft, wistful look in his eyes. So when I finally came around to the idea, when I finally felt ready and we saw those 2 faint lines on the test, I thought we were both on top of the world. We were elated, crying and holding each other in our tiny bathroom, the little plastic stick representing a whole new future. We immediately started planning, or rather, I immediately started planning. I dove headfirst into research, creating spreadsheets for budgets and Pinterest boards for nursery themes. I was nesting hard. Josh, on the other hand, just sort of floated along. He'd give a non-committal "looks good, babe" to any crib or stroller I showed him. He didn't seem to have an opinion on anything, not even the baby's gender, which was bizarre for someone who had been so vocal about wanting a child. I tried to convince myself it was just nerves. The reality of fatherhood was probably sinking in, and he was overwhelmed. I tried to talk to him about it gently. "Are you feeling okay about all this?" I'd ask. And he'd just give me a tight smile and say, "Of course, babe. Just a lot on my mind with work." About 2 months in, his detachment started to feel less like nerves and more like something else. He started making questionable little comments. Nothing overtly cruel, not yet. But they were enough to plant a seed of doubt. I'd show him a picture of a nursery I spent hours designing online, a calming, woodland-themed room, and he'd just frown and say, "Why do we need all that stuff? Can't it just sleep in a drawer next to our bed?" I'd laugh it off, thinking he was joking, but the joke never landed right. It felt dismissive. Then came the total disinterest. I'd send him photos of cute baby clothes, a little hat with bare ears, and his only response would be a one-word text, "Cool," or "Sure." When I confronted him about it, he blamed work stress. "I just can't handle all of this right now," he'd say, his voice edged with irritation, making me feel needy and guilty for even asking for his involvement. The hurt was a constant, dull ache in my chest. My body was going through a profound transformation. My bump was really starting to grow, and with it came the back pain, the relentless nausea, the hormonal swings that left me crying over a commercial for car insurance. All I wanted was to rest, but I was pushing through, planning every single detail for this baby, our baby. And there he was, too stressed to offer a single opinion, too stressed to even feign excitement for the child he claimed to want so desperately. I kept making excuses for him until he started spending more and more time with a coworker named Bill. Bill was one of those perpetually miserable guys who seemed to hate his own family, constantly complaining about his wife and kids being a ball and chain. Josh started going to Bill's house 2 or 3 times a week to de-stress, which apparently involved drinking beer and playing video games in Bill's garage. I remember one night, I was in so much pain I could barely stand up straight. My hips felt like they were splitting apart. I begged him to stay home with me. I just needed him there, maybe to rub my back or just hold my hand. He just patted my head condescendingly and said, "Sorry, babe, I really need this. Bill gets it." He would come home late, reeking of cheap beer, and find me sick in the bathroom. He'd hand me a glass of water without a word, maybe a perfunctory pat on the shoulder, and then he'd go to bed. The affection completely vanished. I couldn't remember the last time he'd given me a real hug, let alone a kiss. Any attempt I made to be intimate was met with a sigh and a lame excuse about being tired. I felt disgusting, unwanted, and profoundly alone in a home we were supposed to be building for our new family. I confessed everything to my best friend, Susie. She was my rock. She listened to me sob over the phone for hours, never once judging me. She tried to be optimistic, suggesting that maybe he was just scared and that some guys act out before becoming fathers. She even suggested I get him one of those parenting books for anxious dads to show him I understood he was nervous too. Desperate to reconnect, I took her advice. I went to the bookstore and found a book with a friendly, non-threatening cover. To make it a special occasion, I decided to make a grand gesture. I cooked an elaborate 3-course meal from scratch. I was 7 months pregnant. My ankles were swollen to the size of grapefruits, and every movement was an effort. But I spent the entire afternoon in the kitchen, determined to create a perfect, loving evening where we could get back on track. It was a complete and utter disaster. Josh barely said 2 words to me through the entire meal. He just stared at his plate, pushing the food around with his fork. The silence was so heavy I could feel it pressing down on me. When I finally presented him with a gift-wrapped book, he looked at it like I'd handed him a venomous snake. And then he dropped the bomb. I think you should terminate the pregnancy. The air left my lungs. The fork I was holding clattered onto my plate, the sound echoing in the silent room. What? I whispered. My own voice sounded foreign, like it was coming from a great distance. He was the one who wanted this. He practically begged me. He wouldn't look at me. He just mumbled about how he wasn't ready, how seeing Bill with his kids, hearing Bill complain day in and day out, made him realize what a mistake it was. He was letting this miserable, bitter man influence the biggest decision of our lives. The rest of the night was spent in a thick, suffocating silence. I felt like I was drowning. The next morning, I left before he was awake. I just needed to breathe air that wasn't tainted by his words. I sat in a coffee shop for hours, staring into a cold cup of coffee, crying on the phone to Susie. She was amazing, just listening, letting me vent, helping me sort through the chaos in my head. I came home that evening feeling a little bit stronger, armed with a list of talking points, ready to fight for my baby, for the future I still foolishly believed we could have. But as I pulled into our driveway, a text popped up on my phone from an unknown number. It was Richard, another one of Josh's coworkers. We'd met maybe twice at company holiday parties. The text was simple. Hey, are you okay? I was immediately on high alert. My heart started pounding. I replied that I was fine and asked him why he was texting me. He tried to backtrack immediately, saying it was nothing, just checking in. But my gut was screaming that something was terribly wrong. I called him. He sounded nervous, like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. I pushed him, my voice getting firmer, more insistent with each question, until he finally broke. He told me what had happened at work a few days prior. All the guys had been congratulating Josh on the baby, and Bill, of course, had made a crude joke, asking him if he was ready for his wife to never be the same again. Everyone expected Josh to laugh it off, to defend me. Instead, he got quiet and said he had some serious concerns. When Richard, feeling uneasy, asked him what he meant, Josh said, and I'll never forget these words as long as I live, she's just getting fatter. It's not pretty to look at, and I've seen the horror stories. Women have a kid and then become too lazy to lose the fat. I don't want to be stuck sleeping with her and pretending I find it hot for the rest of my life. He tried to laugh it off like a dark joke, but Richard said the room went silent. A few of the guys, Richard included, called him out for being a disgusting pig, but Josh just doubled down on it, trying to justify his position. I hung up the phone and just sat in my car, parked in a dark, empty park, and I wailed. It was a raw, guttural sound of pure heartbreak. The man I loved, the man who I was creating a life with, was repulsed by me. He was publicly shaming me for the physical changes that came with carrying his child. His request for a termination wasn't about fear, it was about vanity and pure, unadulterated disgust. Every distant, dismissive comment, every rejected touch, every night he spent at Bill's, it all clicked into place. It took me almost an hour to pull myself together enough to drive home. My hands were shaking so violently, I had to grip the steering wheel with all my strength. I had to pull over at one point and just practice my breathing, my vision blurred by tears. I recorded frantic voice notes to myself, just to try and keep my thoughts straight, to build up the courage for the confrontation I knew was coming. Just then, my pregnancy app pinged with its cheerful little notification. Your baby is now the size of an avocado. A fresh wave of sobs racked my body. This tiny, innocent life inside me deserved so much better than this, so much better than him. When I walked through the door, Josh was on the couch, headset on, yelling at a video game. He hadn't even noticed I was gone for hours. The casual, blissful ignorance was the final straw. I walked straight to the wall and ripped the console's power cord out. The screen went black, and the sudden silence was deafening. He tore off his headset, fury on his face, starting to yell about losing his game. And then he saw my expression. The anger vanished, replaced by a flicker of fear. He actually took a step back from me. Without a word, I held up my phone, showing him the text from Richard. "Is this true?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. He just got defensive, sputtering about how Richard was exaggerating, how it was just guy talk. I just stared at him, waiting for an apology, for a hint of remorse, but there was nothing. Then he had the nerve to try and gaslight me. "You're being overly emotional," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "It's the pregnancy hormones." That's when I played the recording. I'd called Richard back after I'd calmed down, my voice shaking, and asked him to repeat everything, telling him I needed to hear it again to believe it. Now, the sound of his coworker's voice detailing every cruel, misogynistic word Josh had said filled our living room. I watched the blood drain from Josh's face. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. And still, after all of that, his response was, "Well, you have to admit, you've let yourself go a bit." I hadn't even gained that much weight, maybe 15 pounds, most of it in my belly. But it didn't matter. In that instant, whatever love I had left for him, whatever hope I had for us, it shattered into a million irreparable pieces. I turned, walked into our bedroom, and grabbed the pre-packed hospital go bag from the closet. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice flat. My hands were trembling so badly that I dropped my keys twice on the floor. He suddenly snapped out of his stupor and panicked, blocking the door, his eyes wide as he started begging me to stay. But his words were empty, meaningless noise. I called Susie and told her to come get me, that I couldn't be in the same room with him for one more second. He kept trying to touch my belly, saying things like, "Don't take our baby away from me," and I flinched away like he was on fire. My own body was physically rejecting him. While we waited for Susie to arrive, he tried crying, claiming he was just scared of being a father. The tears were so fake, it was almost comical. But the look in his eyes when he glanced at my stomach, it was pure disgust. There was no hiding it. All our conversations about baby names, about what color to paint the nursery, it was all a performance. A complete and utter lie to get what he thought he wanted, before he realized it came with consequences he found aesthetically displeasing. Susie arrived like a hurricane, taking one look at my face and shifting into protection mode. As she helped me pack a bag with essentials, Josh followed us from room to room, his moods shifting wildly from pathetic pleading to outright threats. Susie, ever the quick thinker, started recording him on her phone. As we were finally walking out the door, he grabbed my arm, hard. "You're not taking my baby," he snarled, his grip tightening painfully when I tried to pull away. I could feel his nails digging into my skin. Susie stepped between us, her phone held high like a weapon, and threatened to call the police. That finally made him back off. The next day, I had a perfect, angry handprint of bruises on my arm. The moment I was in Susie's car, the adrenaline faded, and I fell apart. 7 months pregnant, no home, no partner, and a future that had suddenly become terrifyingly uncertain. But Susie just cranked up the heat, put a hand on my knee and said, "You're not alone in this. We'll figure it out." She took me to her place, guest room already made up, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of genuine safety. That night, as I lay in the dark, my mind racing with fear, I felt the baby kick. A strong, definitive little thump, as if to say, "I'm here. We've got this." And in that moment, I knew I could do this. I had to. I got up, found a notepad and a pen, and started making a plan. The next few weeks were a blur of logistics and legal battles. My first call was to my OB/GYN, who confirmed my blood pressure was dangerously high from the stress and scheduled extra monitoring. I found a women's resource center that provided free legal aid, a true lifesaver, as I couldn't afford a lawyer on my own. When I finally unblocked Josh's number out of a morbid curiosity, I had nearly 40 missed calls and a flood of texts. Every single one was about him, about how I was ruining his life, how I was being cruel and vindictive. Not a single message asked if the baby was okay. I blocked him again for good. A week later, I went back to the apartment with 2 of my biggest male friends to get the rest of my things. He'd changed the locks. I had to call a locksmith and show my lease and ID to let me into my own home. Inside, it was a war zone. He had destroyed my things. He had ripped pages from my pregnancy journal, smashed the baby monitor I'd just bought, and taken a pair of scissors to every single piece of baby clothing I had so lovingly picked out. The little onesie my mom had sent me, the one with little foxes on it, was in ribbons in the bottom of the trash can. Seeing that, something in me hardened. This wasn't just a breakup. This was war. I got a temporary restraining order, found a tiny 1-bedroom apartment my parents had to co-sign for, and tried to start over. But the harassment was relentless. It was like he had made it his full-time job to terrorize me. He'd parked down the street from my new place, just watching. He created fake social media profiles to send me threatening messages, things like, "I'll get my baby with or without you." He called my work and told my boss I was mentally unstable and a danger to my child, nearly getting me fired. The police were little help, often dismissing my reports as a messy, domestic dispute. I felt like I was screaming for help and no one could hear me. The true nightmare fuel was when my brother, KB, found a hidden camera in my smoke detector. He'd been watching me in my own home. We called the police, but they said they couldn't prove he'd installed it. I spent money I didn't have on a private security company to sweep the apartment. They found 2 more. I felt violated in a way I couldn't even articulate. His mother, Marlo, started calling me, not to apologize for her son's monstrous behavior, but to guilt-trip me. She accused me of being cruel and vindictive, of trying to keep a loving father from his child. I recorded every single call and added it to my growing evidence file. The stress was immense. I was put on bed rest, my blood pressure dangerously high. At 36 weeks, I woke up at midnight to the sound of someone trying to force open my front door. It was Josh, drunk and screaming that he just wanted to see his baby. KB, who had been sleeping on my couch for a week, held him off while I called 911. This time, with clear video from KB's phone and my mountain of documented harassment, they finally arrested him. At the emergency hearing, his co-worker Richard testified about the comments he'd made at work. The judge, a no-nonsense older woman, looked at Josh with utter contempt, extended the restraining order, and, mercifully, denied bail. With Josh in jail, I finally had a moment to breathe. But the trauma lingered. 2 weeks later, my water broke in the middle of the night. I was alone. I called an ambulance and then Susie, my hands shaking too much to even pack the last few things in my hospital bag. I gave birth to my daughter, Lily, after 6 excruciating hours of unmedicated labor, with Susie and KB as my only support. The joy of holding her for the first time was the most overwhelming, powerful emotion I have ever felt. She was perfect, but my joy was laced with a thick thread of fear. The day after Lily was born, Marlo showed up at the hospital, causing a huge scene in the lobby, screaming about her grandmother's rights. Security had to physically remove her. I couldn't even go home. A domestic violence organization helped me get a spot in a secure, safe house. Josh was eventually sentenced to 18 months in prison, but with parole, he would be out in 9 months. That was the deadline. I had to rebuild my life from the ground up. And I did. I started therapy for PTSD. I poured every ounce of my energy into being the best mother I could be to Lily. And one day, at Lily's 6-month checkup, I met her nurse, Tim. He was kind, he was gentle with Lily, and he had a warmth and a steadiness that I hadn't felt from anyone in a very long time. He never pushed, he never pried. He just became my friend. When I finally moved out of the safe house and into a new, secure apartment in a different city, he was the one who showed up with a truck and a pizza, no questions asked. He taught me grounding exercises for the panic attacks that still ambushed me. He was just good. A good, decent man. 9 months later, Josh was released. He immediately cut off his ankle monitor and vanished off the grid. The terror returned with a vengeance. Without a second thought, Tim moved into my guest room. "You and Lily are not going to be alone," he said, and that was that. Weeks of sleepless nights and jumping at every sound followed, until one day, the police called. They had arrested Josh. He had been trying to break into my old apartment, the one he thought I still lived in. He was sent back to prison for violating parole. That second stretch of his incarceration was when Tim and I fell in love. It was slow, cautious, and built on a foundation of trust and respect he had earned 1,000 times over. He never tried to replace Lily's father. He just tried to be the best man in her life he could be. And Lily, who was now a babbling toddler, started calling him Dada all on her own. It felt right. Tim proposed on her 2nd birthday, in our little living room, with Lily clapping her hands. We planned a small wedding, with heavy security. We had to. During the ceremony, as we were exchanging our vows, his mother, Marlo, tried to crash it. She actually made it to the doors of the chapel before my brother and his friends, acting as our security, physically blocked her path. She was arrested for trespassing. We were finally married. We were a family. Life began to feel normal, and the normal was beautiful. I got pregnant again, this time with a heart full of joy and excitement, not fear. We bought a house in a gated community, another layer of protection for our growing family. But the nightmare wasn't quite over. When Josh was released again, he started stalking us. We saw a car that looked like his near Lily's preschool. He violated his parole again and went into hiding, and we later learned he had been living in a cheap apartment just 3 blocks from us, watching, waiting. He was captured after a citywide manhunt, just 2 weeks after our son, Logan, was born at home because I was too terrified to go to a hospital. This time, the justice system didn't fail me. He was sentenced to 5 years. And with that sentence and the overwhelming evidence of his years-long campaign of terror and obsession, the judge finally granted my petition. His parental rights to Lily were terminated. It was over. A few months later, in a small, quiet courtroom that smelled of old paper and wood polish, Tim officially adopted her. The day we got the final papers, we all cried. Tim, me, even my stoic father. They were tears of pure, unadulterated joy and relief. Tim framed the adoption certificate and hung it right in the center of our family photo wall. Years have passed now. We had to relocate one final time, through a victim protection program, to a new state where he could never find us. The last we heard, he had tried to access our new information from a prison computer system and had another 10 years added to his sentence for it. We are finally, truly safe. Logan is a force of nature, all dirt and dinosaur noises, and Lily is a bright, kind, happy little girl who knows nothing but the steady, unconditional love of her father, Tim. Sometimes, in a quiet moment, I'll look at my family, at this beautiful, peaceful life we've built, and it feels like a dream. Josh meant to break me, to leave me with nothing, to make me feel as ugly as he thought I was. But in the end, his hatred was the catalyst that led me to everything. He showed me the absolute worst a person could be, and in doing so, he cleared the way for me to find the absolute best. We didn't just survive the storm. We learned how to build a life in the sunshine that came after.